welcome to this new series called LinkedIn for Leaders. And in this first conversation, we have Robyn Young. Hey, Robyn, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you.
Fantastic to have you. And I'm gonna do a quick introduction about Robyn. So Robyn Young is based in LA and is the founder of Young and Co, a strategic creative studio that helps clients create a unique and ownable brand point of view. In her sphere, in her spare time, she dabbles in improv comedy, mentors young budding entrepreneurs, advises nonprofit organizations, and delivers keynotes for audiences who can benefit from her unconventional perspective. We're here today, of course, to discuss her brand new book, Build Your Brand Universe, that is already number one on the Amazon hot new releases list. Congratulations on that, Robyn. And in today's discussion, we'll cover aspects of Robyn's book and draw parallels between brand building for companies and personal brands. So, how different are they really? And given we have about 28, 29 minutes, I'm going to jump straight into the first question, Robyn. Um, Amazing. So maybe if you could just start by telling us about the book, why you decided to write it, and where it really came from, and what can readers take away from it.
Yes, great questions. So it's an interesting story in that I had originally planned for this to just be a digital workbook, like a download. It's funny how it progressed from there, how it evolved. As I started to work on the book and really distilling the information down, I realized that I had a lot more to say than would really lend itself to a digital download. So that's when I started to see it as more of a book. Now, I always said that if I ever created a book, especially a book on brand building, that I did not want it to be a theoretical, philosophical book that was really more intended to teach other brand strategists how to be better brand strategists. I wanted to create something that I feel like didn't exist. Something that would have been very useful to me as a founder when I started, which is something that was more action oriented. I've been building brands for, 8 years at Young and Co, my company. But before that, I had worked in, a number of different verticals in terms of brand building, everything from market research to copywriting to communications to, I even have a formal visual arts background. So I've really grown up in this industry. And so I've had a lot of time to kind of work with the ins and outs of brand building. So the idea behind Build Your Brand Universe was, how can I take the different facets of building something that is more than just a visual identity. So more than just logos and color schemes and websites and taglines, because that's not real brand building, right? That's your brand. Yeah. As the book suggests, that's your branding, right? But brand building, especially today, is about creating a whole ecosystem, a whole world, an empire in which your customer base, your audience can live in, right? Yeah. Doesn't require a physical space to do that. Happily, we've got so many, great digital platforms now, so much opportunity to share what your thinking is, what your vibe is. But how does one go about building that? So I divided it into 5 different layers of brand building, and that's what we'll talk about today. But it was a way to sort of pull the pieces apart in order to help somebody make sense of, what does it actually take? How do I build a brand universe? How do I build something that's very sticky and, attracts other people into my world? What does that even mean? What does that look like? So I borrowed some of the principles of world building from other spaces like gaming and comedy and film and, books and music, and applied them to brand building. And I think that's the fascinating part for me. That's what makes this book really different. Is it's very applicable. It still treats brand building as what it is, an art. It's not a science. This is not like, a roadmap. It's simply a way to look at all the facets of brand building and to start to determine what might be the right ones for your brand. So it still allows for enough space for customization for each reader.
Amazing. And I have to say, I obviously read the book, and what I loved about the book was that it's about 130 pages, so it's a quick read. You know,
Yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
quick read, and yet it is so packed with actionable examples. Everyone from an Airbnb to a Glossier to Red Bull is mentioned there, and a whole bunch of other Patagonia and so many other sort of well-known brands, right? But contextualizing those brand stories into ways that even a first time founder can make sense of and then action, as can someone who has been a senior leader for 20, 25 years and can take something else away. And what I also liked was that you have a lot of these, a little, workbook kind of sections throughout the book. So you can pause, and by the end of it, you have this great primer, and then you have something that you can actually act on. So very much appreciate that.
Yes. Yes. That was the intention. The intention wasn't for you to just walk away from the book and be like, okay, great, but now back to life. Right? It was about, how do I take this information and apply it to my business, or apply it to my personal brand, or apply it to my life, right?
Yeah.
The intention was to take the information and to actually put it into action.
Yeah. And since you mentioned personal brand, and that's what we're here also to do, right? To draw paddles from the amazing learnings in your book and how it can be applied to personal branding as well. So briefly, if you could also maybe, because you've been doing branding for a very long time, so how would you recontextualize some of the key learnings that someone can take away from the book with respect to building a personal brand as well? So briefly, if you
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this applies to whether you're building a small brand world or a big brand world, or you're building a business brand or a personal brand. The beauty of the principles is that you can still utilize them. Obviously, the platforms that you use, that might be different, right? So you're not going to have a brick and mortar store probably for a retail environment for a personal brand. You could, I mean, Mr. Beast, for example. Obviously, like there's different brands now encapsulated in his world, but obviously it's going to depend a little bit about what's your end goal. But I think the principles themselves still apply. So starting with a brand point of view, if you are out there, regardless of whether you're building a professional career, or you're building, maybe you're a creator, or maybe you want to be an influencer, maybe you want to be seen as a thought leader in your space, regardless of what kind of personal brand you're looking to build, you need to have a distinct point of view, something that differentiates you from the others in your space, right? So that's the very first chapter, discusses how to do that, how to look at your industry or even the world at large, see the holes in the space, right? What's really not being talked about? Where is there fresh territory here? And then how to shape your brand perspective, we call it brand strategy, brand story, brand narrative. By the way, those are all the same thing. Brand positioning, brand strategy, brand point of view, they're all the same thing.
Company or a personal brand applies the same, yeah.
Yes, exactly. We create too many words for essentially the same exact thing, which is what makes you different from what already exists out there. Why should people listen to you, right? So in that chapter is where I use storytelling techniques to help you develop that brand point of view, right? So, you can look at that through the lens of building your personal reputation as a thought leader or a creator or whatever, and say, before I get to things like what should the color of my backsplash be on my LinkedIn banner, before you get to any of that, you should ask yourself, what is my unique perspective?
Yes.
What do I have to offer that is different? Not at a service level, not from literally what you're offering. I mean, sure, it should connect with that.
Yeah.
But from a much bigger level, what is the bigger idea behind what your brand is and what you want to become known for? Does that make sense?
Yes, I completely agree. And in fact, I want to, you've said in the book, a brand for everyone is a brand for no one. In the context of having clarity on your unique voice, and that's exactly what you're mentioning. And you also mentioned the 12 brand archetypes. So can you just talk about this a little bit more? A brand for everyone is a brand for no one. What does that mean?
Yes, perfect segue, Karan, by the way. So if you're trying to be all things to all people, what that really means is you lack focus.
Yes.
And if you lack focus, then you're essentially going to get to a place where you're slinging platitudes. You're probably putting things out there that, yeah, people won't come on and hate your LinkedIn comments, but they also won't really love them either.
Yeah.
Maybe some of your friends and, your supporters will, because they want to see you rise, and that's all well and good. But it's not a distinct perspective. So, it's sort of middle territory,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, very much. Yeah.
You're right, exactly. You fall into the noise that way.
Yeah.
So I think the importance of having a perspective is first asking yourself, would anybody disagree with my perspective?
Mm.
If the answer is no, then you don't really have a perspective. The whole point of a point of view is that somebody should disagree with it, right? Somebody should see it differently. Yeah.
Yes.
The more you lean into that, the more polarizing your point of view, oddly, the more you attract the people who share that point of view, because it feels very bold. It feels very different to them. It breaks through that white noise, right? Now, it doesn't mean that you have to be political. We all know that LinkedIn is not the best place to be political, particularly. So this doesn't necessarily mean you have to do that, but you can have a distinct point of view about your industry. You can be very passionate about the conventions that you think should be broken there, the things that you see that are already broken or breaking there. You can form a distinct point of view around things that have nothing to do with politics. So I think sometimes people hear this idea of like a polarizing brand point of view, and given the nature of what we've just gone through, everybody just associates it, like it's immediately connected with that. It's like, no, there's a great way for you to utilize this framework to build something that feels very unique and distinct to you, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
backs up and supports why you do what you do every day. But if you're trying to be all things to all people, that just gets lost. Because here's the thing.
Yeah.
You want people you want to make it easy for them to think of something when they think of you. The name of the game is how in control you are of that perception.
Mm-hmm.
It's generally based on how compelling it is and how clear it is, right? If it's not compelling and it's not clear, it's going to be harder for people to think of that thing when they think of you. In most cases, especially let's say professionals, they'll associate what you do with just you, right? Oh, Robyn, she works in branding. That doesn't give me much positioning power, right?
Yeah, it's not distinct enough, right? Yeah.
It's not distinct enough. There are tens of thousands of other people in LA alone that also do that.
Exactly.
So it's like, I want them to think beyond what I do. I want them to think of something much more specific. I want them to think of this point of view when they think of me. What is that point of view? And the point of view can change. I mean, over 8 years, mine has changed. It's evolved a couple times. It doesn't mean that today what is true about my point of view wasn't true when I started, but what I focus on, that's what's different. That's what needs to be more clear and compelling. It's also important to like shape it around what the environment is. So if you're shaping a point of view 10 years ago and you've got a whole new environment now and it's no longer relevant, it just doesn't work, right? That's why you'll see brands that will evolve their brand strategy over time, because as the times change and as people's perceptions of what they focus on changes, your brand needs to evolve with it, right?
Yes.
Your brand personally needs to evolve with it too. So it's important to keep that in mind as well.
So many great points over there, right? I mean, like if I were to just sort of recontextualize that in a different way, like the importance of starting with a niche or niche, however you sort of would pronounce that. And a lot of the time, people are unsure about, okay, I'm going to start. So if I like recontextualize in the context of personal branding or talking about it on LinkedIn, right? A lot of the time, people are saying, okay, I'm a sales leader or I'm a marketing leader or an operation. I'm just going to talk about operations. And the example I bring up is when let's say if I come to LA today, right? I'm not just going to come there and say, I'm hungry. I go to Google, I look for Chinese restaurant. No, I'm going to look for, I'm in LA. Can I find an Elvis Presley themed Chinese restaurant which I can get to in a go kart? I'm looking for something very specific. I'm looking for a unique experience, right? And then
Right.
that's what gets me exciting. And exactly what you said. There's someone offering that very specific thing, and that's what you're actually looking for. Otherwise, if you're just looking for Chinese restaurant, you're going to find thousands. And how are you going to find something that works specifically for you? And that's so important. And if I were to sort of build on that, a lot of what you're saying is the more you have clarity around what the way you're framing your point of view, and also that point of view can evolve, but it's recall value, right? The more you're pushing the same thing out with it, the more likelihood that it's an amplified message, that one thing is pinging many times over. Now, if we were to sort of fast forward and we've been pinging this particular frequency for a very long time, right? And I'm just going to keep bringing in a couple of different concepts that you've mentioned in the book, which is so interesting. You've mentioned one which is called a brand obituary, which I think is quite cool. So like the idea of, you've been talking about something and then say maybe sometime in the future, whether for your company brand or for yourself also, what is it that would show up on your epitaph of this brand or of yourself as an individual? And I know that you do this as an exercise, so I'd love to know, how does someone think of something like that? Because maybe some that can also play a role in how I show up today and what I write about today, and how I express myself today. So your thoughts?
Absolutely, absolutely. So this is something that we had started incorporating into our work with clients about a year or two ago, and I think for us, it's always through the lens of how do we get more focused. How do we really zoom into what do we want to become known for? How do we try to see the end and work our way towards it? Right. I always like to say, you can't hit a target without aiming. Like that's just, it's quite impossible, right? So if you have, I might have different ways of actually hitting the target. Yeah. Just like, if I'm looking to get to a destination, I might have different ways of getting to that destination, but I'm never going to get to the destination if I don't know what the destination is. So the destination can change. The way in which you get to the destination can change. But if you have a goal in mind of what you're trying to hit, I find that it makes it a lot easier to say yes to the things that are in line with that and no to the things that aren't in line with that. And I think for us, especially as professionals, it is so easy, especially in this day and age where we're trying to optimize everything and be everywhere all at once. And I say that just creates an insane amount of burnout for any person. And it doesn't matter how, just we are trying to productivity hack our way through this, and it just isn't working, right? We need to start saying no more. We need to start sacrificing more. It's easy to sacrifice the things that aren't a good fit anyway, that are just, they're just a no anyway, like things that are not that great of an opportunity. It's easy to sacrifice those things.
Yeah.
It is significantly harder to sacrifice things that feel good, but aren't in line with that end goal.
Yeah.
That is
You
much
can't do
harder.
everyone, everything to everyone, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. Again, connecting back with that. So looking at the idea of obituary through the lens of personal brand, it feels a bit ominous. I get it. Thinking about your death, I understand. the goal, think of it as sort of a Charles Dickens, like, Ebenezer Scrooge. He goes through this one night where he can see what lays ahead of him, and he starts making distinct changes about his behaviors, his
Yes.
mindset, the way he acts based on that end result, right?
Yes.
It's that same concept, right? It's starting to align what you're doing in the now, how you're thinking, how you're behaving. What are you doing today? How is that in line with what you want to become known for? So,
Yes.
because we work with legacy builders, I mean, we're not looking to work with the kinds of people who are just want that hockey stick acquisition and that hockey stick growth, acquisition, exit, we're out. It's just not our customer. Many blessings to them. It's just not our customer. Our customers are the kinds of people who actually want to enjoy the builds. They
Yes.
want to build a legacy. They want to build an empire. It can be a small legacy. It could be a personal legacy, right?
Yeah.
It's still about wanting to create something magical that you can feel outlives even you, right? And serves your purpose on the short time that we have on earth that nobody really is in charge of, right? So thinking about that end goal, writing this obituary, while a bit ominous, it does help you gain perspective about what is super important to you from a brand perspective. What is the thing that you want to be most known for? Because the things you're doing today, if they don't align with that, then what are you doing? Why are we doing them?
Yeah.
It can even be a matter of prioritization too.
Yeah.
The way you prioritize what you do, how you think, how you behave should be in line with what that end goal is too.
Completely agree. And in fact, when I work with leaders, I, having done branding for a very long time, and marketing, etc., I prefer working with leaders. One of the caveats I have at the outset is that we have to have clarity on where is it that you want to land in 12 months. If you're committing to creating, say, one or two high quality pieces of content every week, if you just take the rest of 2025, that's maybe about 80 90 posts. That's a lot of writing. There's a lot of
Yeah.
perspective sharing. Um, where do you want to get to? What is it? How are you going to evaluate the success of that effort? And identify that as my North Star metric, and then work back every quarter from that. So exactly, different version of the same thing. And since we have about 7 8 minutes more, I know that you and I talked about a bunch of other questions as well, but we do have some audience questions also coming in, and I want to
Sure.
bring some of those in. So thanks for your questions, Jürgen and Phoebe. I'm just going to come to Jürgen's questions first. He asks, how would you say is the best way to find your tribe? Many of us have several businesses, and I echo your statement of a brand for everyone is a brand for no one. So, how do you build a brand around my different personalities, so to speak?
Really, really great question. So we've all heard, we may have heard of this idea of an audience persona, right? Marketing has, I think, pushed us into this zone of we want to get very specific around the demographics of our audience, right?
Mhm.
That is, it's useful information to have, especially as you're setting up ads and things like that. You have to have some of that demographic information ready to go. Okay. But when you're building a brand, you don't want to necessarily do it for a demographic. You want to do it for a psychographic, right? So
Mm.
instead of thinking about things like age and gender and location and things like that, you want to divide your audience through a different perspective, and that is mindset,
Mm.
right? Mindset.
Mm.
So, what is the mindset of the audience you're looking to attract? Now, be careful that you don't end up becoming a brand for all people again by doing this. You should still be able to use the system of, okay, if I argue this mindset to attract this audience, could the other side also be argued and be a completely relevant point of view? Right, that part is incredibly important. It needs to be a completely relevant point of view, one
Yeah.
that maybe you even know people who absolutely agree with that point of view.
Yeah.
Right. To use an example, we talk about how in the startup world, especially, we're for the zebras, not the unicorns. The unicorns are looking for that those insane evaluations, that quick rapid growth, customer acquisition. Like, this is what they're all about.
Yeah.
Zebras are more focused on the long-term sustainable growth. We are for that
Mm.
audience, right? That says more about their mindset than it does about what gender they are, where they live, what age they are, right? So I think, especially in cases where you have multiple businesses, you could create a brand that encapsulates multiple demos who all share the same mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you can do it. That's how you attract people from different demos. If you can create something that really speaks to and divides the world through a different lens, not through gender, not through age, right? Frankly, I feel like things like age and gender, people they don't always behave the way their demographic information says that they should. So I actually feel like this is a strategy that people should be using anyways when developing not just a personal brand, brands in general.
Brands
Right.
in
We should be
general.
looking at, we should be looking at things through a different lens, because somebody who is in a metropolitan area in their 20s might have the same perspective as somebody who's in their 50s in a rural area, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can find that. You just need to identify what is it that they share? What's the
Yeah.
mindset that they share? What are the values that they share?
That they
And
share.
how do I assert my brand in a way that would attract both?
They would
Right?
attract growth, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we spoke about this, before started this conversation, that these 30 minutes are going to go back really fast, and some of the
Right.
last
As
three
we
four
have.
minutes, and we do have two more questions, and I want to factor in, maybe if you want to give a quick short answer to some of these, Robyn, because I do want to, how can people get in touch with you, and you're also launching a new course which I want to sort of briefly touch on. So Madhavi has a question, and Phoebe, I do want to come back to your question because it's a nice one maybe to end on. But Madhavi has a question. She says, tuning in from Amsterdam, in an era of increasing transparency, how can individuals, freelancers, navigate between projecting an aspirational brand and maintaining genuine authenticity? You have a minute, Robyn. What can you share?
Really great. I mean, this is such a heady one to try to accomplish in a minute. But what I would say is, I think you can project something that is aspirational, but maybe finding those formats where you can be authentic about the steps that you're taking to build towards that.
Sure.
Right. So there's different platforms where people want to get to know you. They want more of that behind the scenes. They
Mm.
want to see you building. That's what makes it feel real to them.
Mhm.
You can still project an aspirational brand whilst giving them a peek behind the curtain. It will feel more special to them that way.
Yeah. Madhavi says, sorry for a heavy one, but no worries. Thanks for sharing
Great
that.
question, though.
It's a great question, and it's something that I've also mentioned in the past, that the opportunity right now is build in public is fantastic, and right now, literally, because, and it's so apt because Robyn has just written a book with, like, I think building your persona, your personal brand, the opportunity is like you're writing your book in public, like you're literally writing your chapters, which can become a book eventually. Of course, Robyn's already written the book, and we're talking about it. Uh, Last question from Phoebe. He says, from Dubai, what was the first brand you fell in love with when you were a child? What's the story behind this?
Oh, that's such a good question. I don't know if it was the first brand, but it was probably one of the first. Lisa Frank. All my 90s babies will appreciate this one. I think that brand just it took something was otherwise so dull. This idea of like school supplies, right? And it was just, blue folders, and just it was not really on anybody's perspective. And through like a very identifiable look and feel, an illustration style, you could call it miles away, and we all just sort of fell in love with these characters in this world of Lisa Frank.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that was probably before I understood and had the branding lexicon, right? I think it was the first time I really started to experience what having a brand world really meant. What did that even mean? What did that look like? What did it feel like? Yeah,
It was a station brand. Okay,
yeah,
fantastic. So
yeah.
nice. Thanks for that question, Phoebe. And I think we're just about on the mark. Thank you very much for this, Robyn. Like I said, this went by very quickly. I trust everyone sort of enjoyed it. I want to, we are doing one more. I'm going to be doing these every week, and the next one is with Lizzie, as you know, also a friend, Robyn, also based in LA. So for people in that time zone, just want to sort of uh, tune into. I'll send a separate note about that. But how can people get in touch with you, Robyn? And you also have a course coming out about your, connected to your book. So if you can briefly tell us about that, and how can people get in touch with you?
Yes, absolutely. So the course will be sort of the next step up from the book, whereas the book, obviously very actionable, but very DIY. For those who need a little bit more accountability, a little bit more coaching, a little bit more support, the course will be organized with the same 5 layers as the book, but it will dive a little bit deeper, give some more examples and a bit deeper of exercises and context to your actual brand world building, with some access to, office hours and coaching and whatnot. So right now it's just you sign up to, get first access to that. So Karan has already shared the way to do that. As far as keeping in touch with me, the channels that I am most active on are LinkedIn. I have a Substack. My Substack is called Yes and. It uses the principles of improv, as I'm an improv enthusiast. We use the principles of improv to look at brand building, and we often will showcase up and coming brands who are doing those things well. And then we have a new series that will be announcing in a week that will be part of Yes and. So I'll be putting out content like every other week at that point. So Substack's a great place to get in touch with me. I'm also on TikTok, Instagram. I'm pretty active on social, so feel free to touch base with me there. I do also have a podcast called Brand F Ups. So if you look on Spotify or Apple, what is it? Apple Podcasts or something.
Apple Podcast, yes.
Yeah, look for Brand F Ups. I actually interview other founders who are building their brand worlds about the mistakes that they made all along the way. It's a very authentic, very, genuine look at what it actually takes to build a brand. I find that to be the most interesting place to Mandavi's question about, how do I show that authenticity? I always was much more interested in people who were real about what it actually took to do these things. And that's why I created a podcast, to discuss what that looked like. So feel free to follow there too.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing those, Robyn. I've shared the link to the course as also a link to one of the Substack articles. So check those out. And of course, Robyn has mentioned the best way to get in touch with her is LinkedIn and some of the other platforms as well. Check out the website, check out the podcast as well. Thank you so much for doing this, Robyn. This is the first in the series. Like I mentioned, we're going to be doing this every week. The next one is with Lizzie. Tune in for that one. And thanks for everyone who joined. And it's quite likely we'll do a part 2 because I have many other questions, but thank you.
We'll talk about that one, Karan. All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much.